Okay. Just let it run through.
Is that how the delay is?
So we've got a problem with the sound from the council chamber, I think. It keeps
We're not
breaking
talking,
up.
Simon.
It's
But
breaking
when you
up?
do, it breaks up.
Oh, okay, that's going to be interesting. Have you all got that problem?
So Dave's better now.
Okay.
Let's see how it goes.
I have to not mumble change. So, right, anyway, it is 7 o'clock, so we'll start. Welcome one and all to October's meeting of Hertfordshire Council's Cabinet. I'm Councillor David Neighbour, I'm the lead of the council. The first item on the agenda are the minutes of the previous meeting, which is paper A. These are the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of September 2020, which are attached to paper A. Could I have someone move the acceptance of the minutes, please?
I'll move those to you, David.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver, and seconded by Councillor Cannell. Are there any issues with the accuracy of the minutes? Looking around, no, consent. Okay, all those in favour, virtual meeting, sorry. I will call out each cabinet member and you say whether you're approving, voting against or abstaining on accepting the minutes. So Councillor Ambler, Simon?
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, Stuart? You're on mute, Stuart, do apologise, just for the record.
Apologies, Chairman. Approved.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cockerell, Graham?
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Cannell, Sarah? You're on mute, Sarah. Can you just take yourself mute and just, so we can all hear?
So sorry. Approve. Full.
Very much. Councillor Neighbour votes to approve. Councillor Causland, Richard?
I approve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Oliver, Alan, you probably moved, I'm guessing you're approving.
Agree.
Thank you. And Councillor Radley, James?
Agree, approved.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm just going to sign those. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. Right, so item 2 is apologies for absence. We are all here, so that's good. Just for the interest of full disclosure, I received requests to attend from councillors Axum, Crooks, Delaney, Forster, Dawn and Warlock. So they are all on the call as well. So welcome, ladies and gents. Item 3 is chairman announcements. I do not have any, other than to remind everyone that item 9, paper E, is an exempt item. I had a thought. I actually think it's probably best if we deal with it in the order of the agenda. So we will have a small period of the meeting where we'll have to go, as soon as we vote for it, into exempt, just to warn everyone. Right, item 4, declarations of interest. If any members have any disclosable interest to make, please do so now. Just to remind you, if you find as we ramble through our various deliberations that you suddenly do have an interest that's come into scope, then just indicate you wish to speak so that we can capture the interest and you can declare it. Okay, item 5 is public participation, items pertaining to the agenda. Don't believe we've had any requests from members of the public to partake in the meeting.
No.
Okay, so we'll move on from that. So item 6, update on suitable alternative natural green space, otherwise known as SANG, which is paper B. This is in the name of Councillor Cockerell, Portfolio Honourable Place. We have both Daniel and Mark on the call as well to offer some assistance. So Graham, would you like to take your item?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Leader. It's quite a straightforward paper, this, so hopefully it will be reasonably self-explanatory. The council has some sangland that it owns around the district, which is used to offset against housing development here and in Rushmore and Surrey Heath. We have a limited amount of SANG, and we have for a number of years had a policy essentially trying to make sure that the council gives SANG to developments which are of strategic importance to district and which are obviously policy compliant. The idea being that we are helping developers to meet the housing need in this area. Since the adoption of the new local plan, we have had to slightly amend the wording around our policy in order to bring it into line with the new wordings within the new local plan. The only significant change that members might note is that we are getting rid of what we used to call the interim avoidance strategy, which was something we were doing to be compliant with the old local plan. That will be replaced by a technical advice note, which Mr. Hawes will be writing and drafting. And that is basically, will be just setting out the processes by which we can use SANG for developments here. That is really about it, Mr. Chairman. Happy to take any general questions from members. If there's anything devilishly difficult, I've promised Mr. Hawes that he can have his 15 minutes of fame by explaining it to us.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Cockrell. Mr. Hawes, Daniel, is there anything you'd like to add before I open it up to questions?
I think the only issue perhaps Graham didn't touch on, which is in the report, is reference to an update to the SAM tariff, the Access Management and Monitoring Tariff, but it's a very minor update, nothing fundamental to is changing there. So no, other than that, no. Okay,
thank you very much. Right, I'll open it up to questions. Do any members on the call have any questions they'd like to ask Graham or the officers? I've got Councillor Forster. I think I'll give it a second. Anybody else? No, so just Councillor Steve Forster. Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a question just to put it into perspective. It was stated by Councillor Cockrell that SANG is prioritised for major developers, if my understanding is correct. I'm aware of a number of situations where smaller developers, particularly of 1 and 2 house plots, for instance, have requested SANG and it's been declined, which implies that we have a shortage of SANG. I wonder if any order of magnitude of how short we are of SANG could be provided, and whether Hart is currently looking at acquiring extra land, whether it's from the MOD or elsewhere, so as to be able to satisfy that, potentially as part of the commercialisation strategy, and if not, why not?
Okay, I think I know the answer, but I will allow Graham to reply to Councillor Forster first.
Thank you, Leader, and Mr. Hawes might want to jump in as well if I miss anything. It's not so much, Councillor Forster, that we have a shortage of SANG as such. It is merely that our SANG is obviously a finite resource, as they say. And as a district, as a local planning authority, as a district council, what we want to try and do is enable developments that will significantly advance us towards our housing target to go ahead, rather than allow small developments that could purchase SANG elsewhere to use up that allocation and then find that I'll use Heartland Park as an example, not that it's I think one that is already in the pipeline, but something like Heartland Park makes a major contribution to our housing delivery. If they were not able to purchase SANG on the commercial market and come to us, if we'd used up all of our SANG, then that wouldn't be able to get planning permission. And that would blow a hole in our housing delivery target. That's basically the thinking behind it. Your other point about acquiring more sang, the council is indeed looking to get more sang if possible. I'm not quite sure, and this is where Mr. Hawes might want to add a bit more detail. I'm not quite sure about timescales or amounts or locations, but it is certainly something that we want to do, because obviously at some point in time the sang that we have will run out.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Cockerell. Mr. Hawes, can you help Councillor Forster? I'm just going to bring Mr. Hawes in first, Steve, and then you can come back.
Okay,
Daniel?
thank you. Thank you. Just to build on Graham's points there, Councillor Forster referred to some small sites not being requesting sang and being declined it. We temporarily ceased granting council sang while we updated our monitoring figures, knowing that you don't want to hit capacity and then breach that, because you're in big trouble then. So we paused giving sang to developers temporarily to catch up on monitoring and understand the position, and allow you to understand the position in terms of what sang is left and what you want to do with it. So part of the purpose of this report is to say that whilst there's a reasonable amount of sang still in the pipeline coming forward in future years, and I can refer you actually to one of the tables in Appendix 2, which gives you some Table 2 on in Appendix 1, gives you a handle on future sang coming forward, which will be in the council's control. We've got a temporary issue with the amount of sang currently available, but what this paper is saying is let's release it. We do have some left, so let's start releasing it again, including to the smaller developers, provided it's all compliant with what this council is trying to achieve in terms of local plan policies. So hopefully does that help?
Okay, thank you. Steve, so you've heard what both Councillor Cockerell and Mr. Hawes had to say. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I would, if I may, Chairman, just to say that I did ask for the numbers, and I know there's some in there, but it would be good to maybe circulate to all members what the details of the shortfall are. It's very reassuring to hear from officers that some more land will be released to those small developers, because of course that contributes enormously to the to some of the local business and local economy. Those small developers tend to be local and tend to use local resource, and quite often are developing sites that in totality might contribute as many houses in a year as a major development like Hartland Village. So I hope that can be encouraged, and Hart can, instead of allocating its funds to other areas and purchasing property elsewhere, can maybe buy some more sang.
Okay, so I'll just come back on that before I get Mr. Hawes to comment. So what people might not have in front of them are the tables in the report. So just to put some numbers on there for Councillor Hawes' benefit, there are roughly 150 homes worth of sang capacity we have in play. There's another 550 that are coming online in the next 2 years. There's roughly 2,000 homes worth of sang that is outside our controlled by other organisations. And we've got another table which shows all the sang that's been used up since the scheme came in. So I think we were right to put a temporary abeyance on whilst we looked at our capacity and made sure we didn't start granting permissions that we couldn't then fulfil the sang. So that was important, we didn't do that. We know that the Brownshot Farm sang was something which the council did historically through a loan from the local economic partnership. I don't know if that's an option we can look at, but I do know that the council continues to look for sites that would be suitable land for sang provision moving forward. I hope that at least gives you some reassurance, Councillor Forster. Right, I've got Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Axon. So Alan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to query one thing. and some of it's been partly answered by Graham and Councillor Cockrell and Mr. Hawes, but it's about, is there any potential in our short-term, medium-term strategy to look at Bramshot Farm? Because I know that one of the things that we were looking at a couple of years ago, and I've read all the tables that you put out for us, Councillor Neighbour, whether or not there was an extension to that in the offing, or whether it's still in the commercial opportunities list, because I thought that would have given us a good short to medium term, shall we say, ability to support SANG provision across the district and to our housing neighbours.
Yeah, so without going into details, we're aware of appropriate land which we might be in a position to negotiate, but obviously now's not the time to have a public debate on that negotiation.
Okay, so it's in the opportunities column, shall we say? But it's commercially in confidence at the moment. Okay, I'm glad it's still there and it hasn't been parked.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Next up, I've got Councillor Axon. Chris, welcome. Councillor Axon.
Thank you, Jim. I'm just trying to unmute myself. Just a piece of clarification, if I could. On the appendix table 4, last item, Hart Village, it's talking about 3,000 odd SANG places. I only understand there's 1,500 units going there. So how does that come about? Can somebody explain?
That's to compute persons and homes, Chris.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, right. So we have 6 recommendations on page 1. Graham, are you formally moving those now?
Yes, I will do if you would like me to.
Okay.
I shall move them on block, Leader.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Quarterman. Right, is there any debate on the recommendations? Just looking around the pictures, everyone seems content. Okay, so I'll put that to the vote. Again, I will call out the list of councillors. We're going to get into that problem of the alphabet again, I noticed, but I will correct it this time. So if you just say whether you are for, against, or abstaining on the vote. Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cockerell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cannell.
For.
Councillor Neighbour votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
And Councillor Quarterman.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Radley.
For.
Thank you very much. Right, so that is that item taken. Thank you all. We then move on to item 7, which is paper C, which is the revised draft budget and outturn based on the data we have the first 4 months of the municipal year. Welcome to Emma Foy, our corporate services manager. James, the paper is in your name. Would you like to introduce the paper and bring Emma in?
So I'm going to apologise in advance for Miss Foy. She has got a very sore throat. She's drinking Lemsip to try and keep herself able to help us out if needed. But ideally, if I can, I hope to address the questions to the best of my ability to save her poor voice. So this is a revised budget which is required because, as we all know, this country, in fact the world, got hit by a pandemic and it had a number of impacts. The main one for us being a dramatic reduction in revenue. And this is called out in this paper in section 4.4. And then in section 5.1, there is a new revised draft budget which attempts to deal with this shortfall. Now, the good news is that as far as we understand it, we qualify in all areas for the government scheme that looks to address a large proportion of the revenues which councils lost, and this is detailed in paragraph 3.2. They're not going to pay everything. They have a strange formula where we're accepted to take 5% on the chin, and then they pay us 75% of what's left, which is strange mathematics. But anyway, that comes out to, if we go down into the table below, an expectation that we can balance the budget by finding savings of about 3% across the board. So the £274,000 shortfall that we will be faced with, we believe can be met with going back and kind of scrubbing the budget with a little bit more vigour. So members will be aware that we have outturns every year which typically come in with an underspend, and we put money into reserves on the back of that. This is basically looking forward and trying to anticipate where those budget savings would have come from and factoring them in now so that we don't have to call on reserves only to put the money back later. Now, if you're really sharp-eyed, you will realise that these columns don't actually quite add up. And that's because we've got a little mistake in the column, the left column for 2021 under new homes bonus. You will see that those two numbers are identical. And actually, the first new homes bonus from us was an estimate. And now we believe that actually we're going to get the number that's there, but we've taken out the original estimate. So the estimate we should have had in the left column was 2352. And if you were to scrub out the number that's there and put in 2352, then the columns will actually add up and balance. That's the overall picture. The recommendation is asking for us to agree the revised budget, and that we would look to fund any shortfall that we have, because the government grant scheme isn't as yet fully signed off, and so we don't know quite what we're going to get. We think we understand, but if there's any shortfall on that, or if we were to fail to find all the savings we needed and we had to dip into reserves, basically we're looking for permission to do that, although at this point in time we're not anticipating having to do so. That's the paper. I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Radley. Right, so we'll move over to questions on the report. As James has said, if they are accountant-like in manner, then perhaps Ms Foy will endeavour to answer them. Otherwise, we can expect Councillor Radley to field them. So at the moment, I only have questions coming from Councillor Bailey. So Stuart, would you like to fire away?
Thank you. When do we anticipate we'll have confirmation from the government that our estimate as to what the contribution will be is what we will receive, or is that a bit of an open book at the moment?
As far as I'm concerned, it's a bit of an open book. If Miss Foy wants to chip in with a better date, then I've got no idea. This government aren't very predictable. She can do.
So the first return, formal return, was due yesterday, but the central government system crashed and everyone tried to put it in. So the deadline's now been extended until tomorrow. But as far as we're concerned, we should find out within the next 2 weeks whether our claim that we've submitted, which reflects the numbers that we've got in this report here, has been accepted.
Okay, so I've got two more questions, if I may, James.
Sure,
Is that all right?
yeah.
And then I'll let somebody else come in. So I see from the paper that this is going to go to scrutiny for comment.
It's been to scrutiny.
Oh, it's been to scrutiny.
Yes.
I beg your pardon. Okay. So if we find that the figure's different, we'll just have to look at it again, I guess, later in the year. The other question, am I reading this correct, that at one point we didn't think that we would, because of the nature of the way that we deliver our leisure services, we didn't think that we would be eligible for government grant. So is it now the case that we're confident that we will get some recompense for the loss on the leisure centre, particularly? The money that we paid.
So you're right on your initial point. The original wording from the government would suggest that we were not able to claim for our leisure services because we have contracted out the running of the leisure service to a third party. It has since been clarified with wording that makes us about 95% confident that we should get recompensed through the scheme for our leisure losses.
Thank you.
Okay, Stuart, you content with that?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Ambler and Councillor Forster wishing to ask questions, so I'll turn to Councillor Ambler. Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly, this factors in everything we know based on the financial impact of the pandemic so far. As we move into the second wave, have we made any estimates as to any additional financial hit that's going to cause us in this financial year?
So as I explained to Overview and Scrutiny, this is a report dealing with the financial situation we were put in by the first wave, whatever you want to call it. As we cannot anticipate the extent of lockdown measures and the duration of any such measures which may come our way over the next 6 months, it would be impossible to predict. We have a historical view of what has happened to date, and if we were to go into a prolonged full lockdown, one might imagine that the same kind of impact would be experienced again, but we really don't know the extent of any measures that our community will be put under.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Simon. Yep. Right, next up, question-wise, I've got Councillor Forster. Steve?
Thank you. Just picking up on what Councillor Ambler said. So is the forecast based on the remainder of this year, based on the budget that was set pre-COVID or at the start of COVID, or is it based on an effective run rate at what we're seeing at the moment, i.e. a partially restricted level of income? And also, last year there was a considerable surplus from parking and from the leisure centre. And are the numbers based on that surplus continuing, or do they assume that that surplus won't continue and effectively won't be funded by that 75% of 95 by our wonderful Conservative government that appears to be bailing us out?
So I'm happy to reassure you that in terms of the decision the Council actually made a few months back to adjust the level of income that we would take from everyone active who runs our leisure centres, that's been factored into this paper. I believe that we have taken into account a new profile with regards to parking finance, but I couldn't comment on actually how that profile has been produced. I don't know, Ms. Foy, if you are able to comment on what model was actually used.
Absolutely, we've adjusted down for car parking and for planning income as well. We've also assumed that the leisure centre does start to return to normality in the new year, so January, but we would need to revise that down if there was I think, you know, as I described, of a national lockdown again, or a national prolonged lockdown, as we saw earlier in the year.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, there are your answers. Are you content that you've had an answer to those questions?
I am. I've just got one question that sparks in my mind, if I may, Chairman. Yeah. Which is, so based on that, we've got a level of car park income now. In particular for the fleet car parks, because we've reimposed charges on those and elsewhere in Hart, and it looks like we're therefore not able to take account of the 75% funding. from central government if we had continued to provide free parking. Is that correct?
Shall I talk? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a technical question rather than a political one.
Okay. So at the moment, our parking, all of our incomes, in terms of the government grant, are based on our revenue projection that we gave to central government, to MHCLG, via their Delta portal in April of this year, which was prior any COVID adjustments. So whilst we have adjusted this budget so that we have a realistic working model within the council, the budget that we are running to for the purpose of any grant claim is that we've registered with MHCLG in April of this year.
Okay. Right, thank you very much for that. Are there any more questions before I ask Councillor Radley to move the recommendations? Giving people time to raise their hand. No? Okay, James, you've got 3 recommendations in front of us. Would you like to formally move those?
Yeah, I think it also makes sense to move them in one go, or keep it simple. So I'm happy to move that. And I look for a seconder, thank you.
Excellent. Does James have a seconder? Councillor Bailey?
I'll second that.
I'm now confused. Stuart, was your hand up to second? You're on mute, Stuart, sorry.
I'm happy to second, Dave.
I know,
Okay,
so
that's fine. That's fine.
Hand up, so I was just making sure.
Yeah, my hand was up to second, but I'm very happy for Sarah to second.
Okay, so Councillor Canal and Councillor Bailey are going to have a fight off camera for who gets to second. I'll let the services team decide. Yeah, okay. Right, so we have a formally moved and seconded motion, so we can now go to any debate that there might be. Are there any members who actually wish to speak to the recommendations we have? James, you can you had your say.
I reserve the right to reply if there is any debate, but for now, I think I've said everything I need to.
Okay. Right, there doesn't seem to be a plethora of hands anywhere, so I think as leader, what I would say for the record now is how grateful I think the council is to the officer team for updating the figures as frequently as they're being able to. I know that all the senior cost centre managers are being put under pressure to make sure that the data we're using is as accurate as we can get it to be. I will personally say that I am actually relieved that the exposure the council has in these very trying, difficult circumstances could be as small as trying to find savings of £274,000. But this is a moving feast. We're all aware of that. We're in the middle of something. We haven't come out the other end. We are reliant on the government. I can't remember the exact phrase Councillor Forster used, but I think he used the word generous government. We are reliant on the government managing the nation's books and checking account so that we can get the money to help us continue to provide the services and have the council in a sustainable fashion. And we don't know what direction the COVID is going to take. And we look around the country, and I think we worry about what's happening in other parts of the country, and we're grateful that we're not yet suffering some of those pressures as a council, as a community. So I think there's a lot more distance to travel before anyone can start being relaxed about this. But I do thank the officer team and Councillor Radley for bringing this to us. I hope that overview and scrutiny were able to have a good debate on the subject and felt it did help enlighten them of the situation we're finding ourselves in and how we're dealing with it. But that's my comments. So anybody else who would like to speak? No? Okay, right. So Jane, anything you want to add before I put it to the vote?
Just to echo your thanks to officers and right across all the teams for actually going back and vigorously reviewing their budgets so that we're in this position. And I've said already, I don't think we're out of the woods yet, unfortunately. So end of.
Okay. Right, okay, I'm going to put that to the vote again. I need to do a named call vote, so apologies for that. So if you could say whether you're for, against, or abstaining on the recommendations. Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cockerell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Neighbour votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quarterman.
For.
And Councillor Radley.
For.
Thank you very much. Right, so they are unanimous. Thank you for that. That takes us on to agenda item 8, which is the future provision of the CCTV service, which is paper D. Again, that's in the name of Councillor Radley. James, you've got a report in front of us, paper D. Is there anything you wish to draw to our attention on that report before we discuss the recommendations?
Yes, there are a number of things I think I'd like to comment on this report. First of all, this is a report and a recommendation I'd rather not be in a position of having to make to this cabinet, because we have a CCTV function today which is run out of Rushmore's offices in Farnborough, and I think they have served us very well for the duration of that contract. Unfortunately, Rushmore Borough Council have decided to no longer to continue to run a CCTV service, and that forces us to go and look at other options. And having soft tested the market, we've come to the conclusion that the best option for us, well, there are two options. One is to move the service over to Runnymede, and the other option is to cease providing a CCTV service. And effectively, that's the choice that we would have. I'm recommending that we continue to run the service and hand it over to Runnymede. We had a very healthy debate over this at Overview and Scrutiny. And Overview and Scrutiny asked me to bring to the attention of Cabinet the key concerns that they had. The first concern they had was over local knowledge. And we have spoken to Runnymede about this specifically. Whether or not staff who are familiar with the area will get 2P'd over to Runnymede is really a question for them. But in any event, any operators in Runnymede would, as part of their training, come to Hart to familiarise themselves with the area on the ground and to understand the position of the cameras and what they're looking at. And anyway, over time, through the process of performing their job, they will get familiarisation with what they see and how things work. There was another concern from Overview and Scrutiny about the level of service that we would be getting. And I think it's fair to say that if you average it all out, the number of screens showing images from Hart will not be as high as it is today. However, Runnymede point out a number of factors. One, we are getting a 24-hour service now, which we currently don't enjoy. They are in radio contact with a number of, community safety providers in the area, and things, the police and other bodies who can call in when there's an incident, and they can just quickly snap to it and give it their 100% attention. And they've got recording of incidents anyway, and that tends to be the main body of the value that comes from having a CCTV service. And they are able to turn around videos to our authorised partners who can ask for those videos, i.e. basically the police, in a very short order, which would help the police pursue their investigations. So overall, the quality of service that we would enjoy is different. It has some things which are better. It has some things which are not so good. But overall, it's a damn sight better than the alternative, which is to cease doing it. And so I would support the recommendations that are in this paper, but I say I'm not doing so with any great delight. We are a hostage to the situation which we are in. I also need to apologise. Mr. Elson, it is his wedding anniversary, so he's not able to attend today. So I will do my best to field any questions. Thank you.
Okay, James, thank you very much. Right, we'll go to questions. I have one which I'm going to use Chairman's prerogative to ask first, but I'll just wait for others to come in, so I've got a list of people there. Right, thank you very much. So it'll be myself, followed by Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Quarterman. My question is, have we been able to consult with the parish councils which do provide us with income, because we have a service level agreement with them?
I have to say, I don't know the answer to that. I would believe that they are aware of the fact that the service is moving over. But again, the conversation would be, do you want us to cancel the service or carry on? There really isn't a choice to be made. Now, given that the parish councils actually fund the service for us, I would think that shows they have a very strong interest in it continuing. If they were unhappy, of course, when they come to set their budgets next time around, there could be a discussion about backing out from the service. I don't think they will. I think they will continue to see the benefit of having CCTV, and therefore they will be happy with the outcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so Councillor Oliver next.
Thank you, Chairman. I can just give a bit of information on the parish council. I think from a Fleet Town perspective, we'd be very pleased if we continued with this service, because we've just commissioned a new camera for our fantastic new facility in Calthorpe Park, which is going to be monitored by CCTV. So we will be pretty destitute if this service disappeared. But I've got two other questions for you, which I hope you can help with James. One is, you talked about the ability for Runnymede to continue to liaise with some of the groups, and I know one of the real benefits from Rushmore was about Pub Watch in Fleet High Street, because they found it very helpful to be able to contact CCTV to say when a particular incident was happening. So I hope that those kind of liaisons would continue. And I also have one question on the report, and I'll just get the number. It's 7.9. Now, we've been put in this position by Rushmore deciding to outsource to another partner, even though we have a contract with them that was going to deal for the next 10 years, and we're only a ways into that. And so I'm a bit concerned about why we have to commit to paying £40,000 to help them decommission the equipment that they decided to not utilise, and to so we say redecorate one of their rooms in Rushmore, and when we have to then commission and pay for new implementation costs to get us to Runnymede. So is there any contractual commitment for us to provide those funds in 7.9 to Rushmore?
I believe that is the case. So there are break clauses in the contract, and there was a mutual agreement that the costs of providing the service and decommissioning the service would be split pro rata between the two councils, and that's why we're faced with the position we are in. It was the contract that we effectively inherited that put us in that position.
Okay, could I come back on that, Chairman?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I would say this hasn't been a joint decision to terminate this service. It's been a decision by Rushmore to terminate. So I think the contractual position ought to be reviewed about whether we should be paying for their decommissioning costs for their independent action.
So Councillor Oliver, I'm very happy to take that back through to officers to go and double check. I think it's one of those situations where either side has a break clause. When the break clause gets pulled, then there's a liability on both sides to make good the infrastructure that was in place. I'm getting a nod from the chief executive, so I think I'm on the right lines. But if we could just go and double check and make sure, but I think we will find that we are in the position that we are in as stated in this report. But very happy to do one other check, Councillor Oliver, to put your mind at rest.
Okay, and particularly check the decommissioning costs, because I think £115,000 just to rip out a bit of equipment and do some paint and paper is excessive.
Well, having been in the control room on a number of occasions and understanding the security systems that they have in place and the extent of the equipment they have, I think there's a lot of work involved in actually getting that equipment out, because it's been pretty well put in my opinion. But again, I'm sure that's something officers can take up and just double check. Maybe we can ask to see the invoices for the work or something.
Well, we could always commission Mr. Collard, who is a very cost-effective disassembling facility.
Okay, ignoring the personal comment. Ms. Hughes, are you able to help us with Councillor Medley's
Yeah,
comment
I was just going
after
to come back on a couple of points. One is, in fairness to Rushmore, they did forewarn us of this issue, and they did speak to us about the cost of the upgrading that will be required to the control room to actually retain the service on site. At that point, I think that there was a joint position taken, which was faced that with that quite significant capital cost. We as officers were asked to go and explore the art of the possible elsewhere. It is true that Rushmore made their decision in advance of us, hence, as Councillor Radley has set out the stall, we are in a little bit of a cleft stick on this one, as Cabinet at Rushmore has already made its decision. Coming back to Councillor Oliver's point, yes, we have checked the contract. You'll be glad to hear that we've done the due diligence on your part to make sure that there is an obligation for us to make that payment, hence why it's in the Cabinet report. If we felt that there was some flexibility on that, then naturally we would have accounted for that in the report. But obviously, if there's any savings to be made, we will have that conversation with Rushmore associated with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I've got two more people who would like to ask questions. They are Councillors Quarterman and Bailey. So, Richard, would you like to fire away?
Thank you very much. Yes, my question relates to the selection of Runnymede Borough Council. I note that we're going with Runnymede as have Rushmore. It mentions in paragraph 5.5 that soft market testing was done, other local authorities were spoken to. So I'd just be interested to know, are Runnymede the only option here? And then I suppose the following question is, and how many other councils are they going into CCTV arrangements for? And are they becoming the Spelthorne of CCTV? So just some questions about Runnymede, please.
If I can come in, and I don't know whether Councillor Radley wants to add anything, certainly I can confirm that a range of different local authorities across the area were asked if they would be interested. I recollect that there was one other unitary authority not too far away from here who were having active conversations with, but ultimately Spelthorne was considered to be a better option. So
or Runnymede even.
Oh, sorry. What did I say?
Spelthorne.
I do apologise.
I distracted you.
Sorry. My mouth out. Runnymede was the option that we went with, because we're bringing you the best option to the Cabinet. The other, and of course, when we go out to the marketplace on soft market testing, we can only take those up who actually express an interest back to us, can't we? So there was a limited pool from which to work within. All the partners that we talked to were very interesting, but actually Runnymede, not Spelthorne, were the option that was the best for us.
Okay.
And sorry, and do we know how many councils they're providing CCTV services for? It's obviously going to be Rushmore themselves and us, minimum, but are there others?
I'm not aware of any others, but we can give you a written response to them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Bailey, then I've got Councillor Forster. So Stuart, please.
Yes, sorry. This is a question. Covering questions. 4.7 refers to the reservations that scrutiny had, and I don't have a copy of the scrutiny report with me, and unfortunately I wasn't at the scrutiny meeting, but it refers to points 2 to 6. So I think that the recommendations possibly in the scrutiny report may have been different to the ones in this report. I think the chairman's scrutiny may be in the meeting. I was just trying to understand what the specific concerns of scrutiny were. I know James referred to the helpful contributions scrutiny made, but I'm wondering if they've been addressed.
So, the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny is very happy to comment as well. As I recall, there was a concern raised about local knowledge, which I addressed in my opening statement. There was a concern raised about the level of service, again, which I outlined in the opening statement. There was a question about our obligation for 2P, which I think got resolved because the staff concerned are employees of Rushmore. I think this has been something that got discussed at the time. The chief executive, very welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I see a nodding. I believe they were the main issues that came out. I don't know if Councillor Warlock wants to add anything.
Yeah, I'll go out of sync because Councillor Warlock's happy to contribute. So, Jane, would you like to come in and give an answer? Help Stuart out?
Yes, thank you, Leader. That Councillor Radley has exactly summarised the points that were raised at scrutiny. And in fact, in respect of the 2P matter, Mr. Elson was there and confirmed that they would be transferred under 2P. So from ONS point of view, I'm quite happy that Councillor Radley has accurately mentioned the concerns which arose in our discussion at our committee meeting.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Right, last question from Councillor Forster. Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been doing some research following the overview and scrutiny, otherwise I would have asked these at that point. But I understand the Runnymede Control Centre is in Addlestone and takes a huge number of calls, around 20,000 Careline calls, including out of hours. Is it proposed on this new service that any calls for coverage or for evidence or anything like that will go direct to the control centre, or will they come through Hart's centre? If they go direct, how will they be logged? And my second question relates to Runnymede's deployment of deployable CCTV. They have a very simply deployable lamppost mounted CCTV that I understand they use for things like antisocial behaviour, etc. And I did ask at scrutiny, but I don't think I got a proper reply to it. I'd just like to ask if that's something that will be covered in this service, because it is something that has been requested multiple times, and I know other parishes have had lots of issues. It seems antisocial behaviour is increasing, and if there's an opportunity to provide enhanced protection for our community, I would hope that that can be accommodated as part of this transfer of service.
So I'm very happy to report that Councillor Forster's absolutely right about the mobile deployable cameras. They are 4G enabled, and Runnymede would be very happy for us to buy into that service. They have given us the indicative costs of purchasing such a camera. It would be £6,000, or we could actually lease them on an annual basis for £2,000. And I strongly expect that at some point in the future, probably the near future, I may very well be coming back to Cabinet suggesting we were to spend some money of that order in order to provision ourselves with such cameras, because I think it's an excellent suggestion. hence why I had the figures to hand. In regard to the call-in process, CCTV have their own channels of communication to the police, to Pubwatch, which was mentioned by Councillor Oliver earlier, to our community safety teams. There are direct lines, there are radio links, so they are connected. In terms of a request for a video recording, I would imagine that would get routed directly to the CCTV service. I don't expect it to get stuck in a queue with 20,000 people making care line inquiries. This is a distinctly separate and different monitoring function.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Right, do we have any more questions before I ask James to move the recommendations? Looking around the screen, I don't see any indications of questions. James, are you happy to move the recommendations Roman 2.1, Roman numerals 1 to 5?
I am.
Excellent. I'll second from the chair, just to keep it short. Okay, is there any actual debate on the recommendations we have in front of us? No? Okay, so I'll put that to the vote. Again, it will be a named vote. You can say whether you are in favour, against or abstaining. Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey. You're on mute, Stuart. Apologies.
Sorry, keep doing that.
Okay.
For.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Cockerell.
For.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cannell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Napier votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quarterman.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Radley.
For.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. Thank you all for your contributions on that item.
Chairman, I don't know if you've noticed. It's okay. There was.
So members, just to advise you that we have multiple officers who are watching our Facebook stream on multiple platforms on each and every occasion now. So please don't feel the need to report any issues from the public, because we have staff covering this all over the place. So as you'll see, Ms. Foy has already advised that it's fine from her perspective. We have officers here as well as in remote locations who are messaging us if there's any indication of problems.
Okay. Right. Councillor Dawn, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I thank the Joint Chief Executive for that clarification. But if we're getting comments from members of the public that the the live stream has stopped, it's clearly stopped for them. And so where are these particular offices located? Because if they're in the Hart district offices, then I don't know if they're getting it directly from your server or they're taking it from a Facebook server in America or wherever it's going. I'm trying to understand how effective the monitoring process is to actually ensure that the residents are able to follow the debate as they might need.
Okay, thank you for your question, Chris. We obviously want to make sure we give you an accurate answer rather than someone like me shooting from the hip. Mr. Jaggard, you have your hand up. Are you offering some sage advice?
Thank you, Chair. I can, in answer to Councillor Dawn's question, I can just confirm I just went straight onto Facebook. I'm working at home, so I'm in a different location on a different internet source, and I could hear the vote taking place clearly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
But obviously, this process is only as good as A, the technology, and B, speaking as a Luddite, the ability of us to use the technology. So I'm grateful that I'm in the council offices and able to benefit from the systems we have in place. So I think it's important we always keep one eye on what's happening, because at the end of the day, it's about democracy and accountability. So thank you for your help with that, Mark, and thank you for raising it, Chris. Right. Okay, we're now going to move to item 9, which is the 5 councils contract. This is an exempt item, so before we halt the feed, we need to agree or not whether to go into private session. So I need to read out something formal, which is not on there.
Voting on the committee service.
Okay.
Chairman, can I ask a question before we get into debate as to whether we go into private section? I was probably preempting the debate to save you looking up the words.
Yeah.
For those who are joining the meeting as members of the public, obviously, if this item was postponed to later in the agenda, just before the meeting closed, they'd be able to leave the meeting, and that's the end of the meeting. Whereas we don't know whether we'll be debating this for 5 minutes or 50 minutes.
That's a good point. Okay. Who do we have that's...
We have Ms. Foy, and we are anticipating and hoping we have let in an officer from South Oxfordshire, Vale of White Horse, who's joining us as a professional support to this item.
Okay, understood. Okay.
Okay, Stuart, your point that you were going to lead on to was well made, and it was one of the things we discussed before the meeting. We just felt it was going to be more practical to do it this way.
Sure.
So,
okay.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so I move that in accordance with Section 100A, Para 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded during the discussion of the matters referred to on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the respective paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs public interest in disclosing the information. I formally move that from the chair, and I look for a second.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Quarterman. We need to put that to the vote. So again, I will have to do it through the list. So can you say whether you are in favour or against or abstaining on the exemption of the public from the item? So Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
Reluctantly for.
Thank you. Councillor Cockrell.
Yes, reluctantly for.
Okay, Councillor Cannell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Neighbour votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quarterman.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Radley.
For.
Okay, so having unanimously taken that decision, we are going to go into exempt session. So the members of the public, thank you for your involvement to date. Keep an eye on the feed because we will be back in public session shortly. Not appearing yet. Okay, we'll wait. Not a problem. Okay. Okay, so thank you all and welcome back to the October meeting of Hart Council's Cabinet. We've just taken an exempt item on the Clyde Council's contract. We'll now be moving back onto the agenda. The next agenda item is item 10, next steps in COVID-19 recovery, which is paper F. This paper is in the name of the Chief Executive, and I am down as a Cabinet member. Trish, would you like to introduce the paper, and then we'll see if we have any questions from people?
Yes, thanks very much, Chairman. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I look at this paper, and of course, I wrote it a couple of weeks ago, and of course, so much has already moved on since I wrote it. So please bear with me in terms of the content because times are changing. So the aim of this report was actually to provide you with an update on where we were with our COVID-19 response. It was aiming to give you an update in terms of our COVID-19 recovery, and also to give some indication as to our approaches to any potential local lockdown. So it was a summary document to cover a whole range of issues. Now, I'm mindful of the fact, as I said before, that matters have moved on since then, and where I can do it in the public domain, I will answer any questions that I can, but you will obviously note that quite a lot of the information that I'm privy to is actually subject to confidentiality within the Local Resilience Forum, so please bear with me if I'm not able to provide you with an answer. You'll see in the table in 4.6 that I set out before you the last remaining decisions that were taken under urgent provisions last time round when we were in the last response phase. Go on to give some discussion around recovery, the fact that we've done quite a lot of work on recovery. We've had a sounding board which has been in place with key stakeholders from across our community and been engaging with those very effectively for a number of months now. We also carried out a wide-scale questionnaire and survey of our residents to assess the impact to them of COVID-19. It was, of course, of its time a snapshot, and naturally as we move forward the impacts to our community, whether in health, whether in mental well-being, whether in employment status or anything else, will be a movable feast, so it will naturally be something which will be subject to change. So I bring it to you so that you're aware of the work that's actually been outlined in our recovery plans. Members will recollect that when considering the service plans this year, which we brought to you quite late on, item number 1 on each service plan for each business unit was response to COVID, and then item number 2 was recovery from COVID. So I'm setting out from the evidence base and all the information that we're receiving around the impacts, what those recovery plans look like. So where I can, I will seek to answer any questions, and where I can't, I will take those away and give written responses.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so we'll go over to questions. I'm looking on my screen. Okay, so Councillor Bay would like to start us off. So Stuart, you have a question? And you're on mute, Stuart, sorry.
Yeah. And so I'm going to try and phrase this as a question because I don't want it really to be seen as a debating issue. But okay. I wonder whether you, Chairman, one of the lessons perhaps when I reflect back on those months when we were in the heat of the pandemic and the decision making, we were into emergency decision making processes and all of that sort of stuff. And as Joint Chief Executive has already sort of referred to, we don't know what the winter's going to look like, and hopefully we will never need to go back into that sort of process again. Is there anything to learn around the role of council, the role of councillors of cabinet that we could do differently in the future? The reason I ask the question is, whilst I was quite engaged with my own portfolio, which had specific responsibilities during particularly April and May and into June, I can't recall us meeting formally as a cabinet, and I know a lot of decisions were being made, had to be made by the officers, but in consultation with what was the group leaders at the time. And I just question what the role of cabinet was, and indeed where full council fits in, because we went quite a while without having a full council meeting. Now, in raising that as a question, I'm doing it as a question rather than as a debate, because I don't want it to be seen as an implied criticism on anybody. I'm just doing it in the spirit of, is there something we could learn? Question for the future.
Okay, I'm going to come in first because I want to deal with the political aspects of the question before I palm off to the Chief Executive the procedural aspects of it.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't meant to be party political.
No. I think we're all on the same page at the moment, but the more politicians speak, the more we have a chance of digressing. What I would say is that a lot of what's happening in the emergency actually was the remit of officers, and the role of members was to basically hang on tight and understand what was going on with the resources that the council had. There were still some day-to-day services we were able to provide, and therefore obviously cabinet members and ward members had their roles, but they were somewhat reduced. I think we were perhaps slow to get into virtual meetings. That was partly because the legislation wasn't in place at the height of the lockdown, and we know that there were individual members, some who might even be on this call, who technology-wise weren't yet able to step up to the plate with that. So it's been a journey, and there's always things that you can do differently with hindsight. I think the way we went through it was good and useful. I can't put the words in other members' mouths, but I hope the process we used of the Chief Executives consulting with group leaders allowed the three groups on the council to feel engaged. I think with hindsight, what I would have said is that we have one member currently who's not in one of those groups, and although I know upon occasion they were helped out and kept informed, that wasn't perhaps as seamless as it could have been, and we will never know on a council like Hart when one of us might find ourselves without the support of party colleagues. So I carefully make that point. So I've got both James and Alan want to come in. Now, if we want to just stick to questions, we can, but I got a sneaky feeling that what's did by a question probably will lead us down the rabbit hole into a debate. But before I bring in other people, Trish, is there anything specifically in your role as a chief executive during the crisis that you need to remind us of, you feel?
Not so much my mind, I think maybe to reflect upon. I mean, Councillor Bailey raised the question about lessons learned. And naturally, we are now all in that place technologically where we're able to have these meetings, and therefore it is much easier, isn't it? So if we do get a second lockdown or whatever might happen in terms of COVID, we're in a much better position than we were 6 months ago to actually make sure that engagement's there. I think I've reflected in the lessons learned piece in Appendix 2. That we did some things really well. Let's be clear. Organisation, I think we rose up and we hit that challenge absolutely full on. But in doing things, you're always going to drop a few balls along the way. So one of the things is the daily email out to members, I think started on something like the 30th of March or the 1st of April. Actually, there was a credibility gap of about 2 weeks where you were calling for information, and to be perfectly frank with you, we were so busy dealing with the muck and bullets of actually dealing with the response. I genuinely didn't have the time to do that. Okay, so I had to carve that into my very long day to make that happen from April. And as you all know, it's continued to this day. It's still 3 times a week you're getting updates from us. The other thing I would reflect is another one around communication. It's not with members, but actually something which we've learned along the way is we're now having regular, as Councillor Bailey knows, because he's party to these, regular catch-ups with our community volunteer coordinators. Again, that didn't start soon enough in the thing. So yes, we've absolutely learned. I think it's an absolute fair reflection that some things we did excellently, some things weren't so great, and we've got to be really honest and take that on the chin and just look to improve them as we move forward.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate the candor. Right, I've got what order are they? Councillor Radley, then Councillor Oliver. So James.
So I've got a direct question and then an observation, which I'm going to cloak as a question. The first direct question is, could the Chief Executive give councillors and residents who may be watching at home the reassurance that we have a plan in place should Hart be forced into a local lockdown situation? And then a follow-on observation from that, the messaging that we get from the media is that if people are in doubt as to the current situation, they should look for local information, which will very often lead people to come and look at Hart's website. And I think we could more prominently on Hart's website give instructions about how people organise to get tested, because I've had questions from people who are actually associated with the council asking, can they just rock up at the car park where we have the pop-up testing centre and get themselves tested? So it would be really useful to remind people how you get yourself registered for a test, and the fact that we've got a pop-up testing centre in our car park actually doesn't mean you can turn up at the council and book a session. And it's also very important for people as they plan their lives in the short to mid-term to actually be able to anticipate when we might be heading for a local lockdown. And therefore, our COVID figures have become not just a casual interest like they were in the first wave, but actually they've become a critical factor in people being able to anticipate what restrictions may be round the corner or how much breathing space they have got. And I wonder if there's any reason why we don't put our COVID case numbers on our webpage. We were sent out a very useful graphic yesterday by the Chief Executive, and I wonder if there's any copyright or confidentiality reasons why we can't regularly update that on our website as well, because that's where people may very well go in the first instance to understand where we are as the crisis undoubtedly escalates at different speeds across the country in the coming months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, James. Trish?
So, Chairman, I think I've got to ask 3 questions,
okay,
and I will try to answer all 3. So in terms of a plan in place for local lockdown, that is a multifaceted answer I'm going to give, because it's actually Hampshire County Council who have the statutory responsibility associated with any local lockdown. So if the government, in consultation with them, made a decision that there was going to be interventions put in place, either by asking Hampshire County Council to do it direct or to require them to do it, it would be at that county council level. So there is a local outbreak plan which is on the county council's website, which is visible for all to see. What we have at a local level is a local resourcing plan. So we're not seeking to duplicate or in any way vary from the county's plan, because that's not for us to do. But what we have is in recognition of what we had to do in the first phase of the pandemic, which was to move staff from one place to another. We've already looked at what that would look like were we to face another local lockdown. So ours is a very much a tactical plan around what we would do in those circumstances, whereas the strategic plan is vested in and a statutory responsibility of the county council. So if I leave that one for 2 ticks, I'll come back to the rest. I'm really pleased that Councillor Radley's raised the topic of testing. It has been an area of question. We have actually recently put out a press release associated with this. We're really happy to support the testing approach. We're really happy to be a venue for that. And you'll appreciate there's actually a recommendation associated with provision of long-term sustainability of that in this report. So I'm very pleased that Councillor Radley has raised it. In the press release, we're very clear that whilst we host it in terms of it's on our property, we have absolutely no influence over the way in which it's delivered, and we actually gave links to the testing system via that press release. If we need to get it more formalised onto another part of our website, absolutely happy to do that. But obviously we've put that information out there because we were finding members of the public asking us questions around it. And no, just for the purpose of the members of the public who are watching, no, you cannot just rock up. And no, if you've got a QR code for somewhere else in the rest of the country, no, you cannot just come to Fleet. You must have a code for Fleet to be tested in Fleet when it comes to us. The last question was around local information. So, Councillor Radley, the information I provided you yesterday, it's actually public information. I can't give you information that sits within the LRF, which is restricted. That's a truism. I'm not allowed to do that. So the information I provided to you is public information. We can put those connections onto our website, but essentially one of those actually came from the BBC, one of those things, and the other one came from a website called LG Inform. So if anybody wishes to Google it right now, it's LG Inform, put COVID after that word, and you'll come to the site, and you can simply choose Hart, and it will bring you to that number. But we can put that on our front desk. I mean, we don't tend to do that because we wait for public health to provide information. Public health, if you go on to the Keeping Hampshire Safe website, on the Hampshire website, they have their own data. And they have their own dashboard, which is printed on a weekly basis. And so we would normally wish to direct people to that information.
Okay, Jen, are you happy you've had some answers to your questions there?
Yeah, I just reiterate, I think people are coming to, well, I know people are coming to our website looking for information. If we could just have an explanation as to where you go to book a test, don't rock up, because you might have put it in the press release. Lots of people don't read our press releases. Our press releases don't always get published anyway. So if you could put that on the website, great. And if you could give signposts to, the most up-to-date COVID figures that you can access are available here, click, then I think we'll be doing a service to our residents, because I think a lot of people are coming to us to be signposted onto other places. So I think it would just be useful to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Oliver, next.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got, in the words of Councillor Radley, I've got one comment and then I've got one very specific question. First comment, I read through the recovery report in great detail because I'm personally immensely proud of how the officers have responded to COVID in Hart, and I don't think I will find any dissenters in the cabinet against that comment. My big question, and it's the but, is that when we were distributing business grants, we found ourselves in a position where we had the responsibility to provide these business grants in a timely manner. We didn't have access to the data, and we didn't have access to a list of actually providing these, and it caused a great deal of frustration and also heartache to our business community. So when I was reading through the recovery plans in the report, particularly around items 5A and 5B in Appendix 1, I wanted to get some assurance that we're putting in place a mechanism prior to February 2022, which is the end date for those actions, that if we're called upon again to support the business community, that we're doing something that doesn't drive us into a position where we can't deliver these grants in a timely fashion, because I think that caused a great deal of heartache to businesses and didn't do our reputation any good. And all the great things we were doing with the hub and support of local communities was being overshadowed by that one issue. And I just hope that that's one of our lessons learned, and we're doing that because we might be put into a position of doing that again if second wave comes in. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to respond on that because obviously the three group leaders were heavily involved in trying to channel those queries when they were coming out. You will recall that there were two waves of grant provided, and the first was done through the business rates, and we had we were definitely penalised by being one step away from the process. And although we were responsible for it, our ability to be fast in reacting to it was not as good as it could be. Luckily, we learnt those lessons, and when the second scheme came out, which was discretionary and was down to us to do, it wasn't based on the business rate database, we were able to make sure that the grant money we had there was given out very quickly and speedily to all those businesses that were eligible for it. The problem was, of course, that it was a discretionary top-up grant, and the amount of money that was there was not enough to make a massive difference for many of the organisations. So I certainly think you're right. It's something that we need to be very careful about where we're going. The exempt paper we just took, which I can't allude to, I think shows that we're putting steps in place to make sure we have more direct control over our ability to engage with those sort of issues.
Could I just come back quickly on that? That gives me reassurance, Leader. It's just that I know the government may or may not, in their wisdom, have an oven-ready business grant distribution process that they're just going to spring on us. And if we don't have that business rates database access, although we're taking steps in the 5 councils contract to get access eventually on that, if we get told to do this in October, you know, have we thought about how we can do this in a more timely fashion for businesses rather than be again? That's my concern is.
That's a good question. I think your concern is perfectly valid. Trish, can you help Councillor Oliver out?
Yeah, we're already in conversations around the art of the possible were this to be required, so that we are, you know, as councillors have alluded to last time round, in fairness to everybody, we were trying to do the very best. The government was trying to do their very best. We were trying to do our very best. And let's be honest, we were battling to try and get everything done in quick order. So recognising that there may be an obligation to move back into this sphere in due course. I don't wish to set any hairs running. The numbers in Hart and in Hampshire are pretty low at the moment, but they aren't in the rest of the country. There are places where it isn't. So, but we are taking the opportunity right now to have those valued conversations around how we would do that were we to face it again. And separate to that, I mean, subject to this, further to this coming out, I think we've also got an obligation to put social isolation payments through. So already the pace of change is starting to ramp up. The social isolation payment is there for people who are on low incomes. It started on this Monday. It was announced only a week before that. And so we have to have a system in place over the next week, so that if somebody is on universal credit or another welfare-based or income-based benefit, and they are told by Track and Trace to stay home, and there's a financial impact to that, we have to look to get them a payment out of £500. So we are moving at pace on a number of different strands already in relation to where we think we might be going in the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you for your question, Alan. Obviously, we're trying to deal with the paper in front of us, but it's perfectly understandable that we're talking around the edges of this. It's a very fluid situation. I would love to be able to say it's the last COVID-19 paper we're going to get this year. It's not. Fact. So I've got Councillor Forster next. Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. This is probably around those fringes or edges. But I would hope that the Chief Executive and the Leader would join me in publicly thanking the Hampshire County Council and all those many hundreds, if not thousands of people at HCC who've been involved in leading this recovery and the initial reaction for COVID, and continue to do so. Because I don't think we've done that publicly, and I think this is a great opportunity to ask if you would join me in conveying their thanks, and maybe do that officially. Even at this juncture, we're not through the crisis, but I think that recognition would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, I'll bring Trish in, Steve. What I would first say is the amount of people we need to thank in our communities is almost limitless. I have been I've said publicly at full council how privileged I feel to be leading this council at the moment with what the staff are doing. But you're right, our communities and other public sector bodies, be it the county council, the NHS, the ambulance service, etc., etc., etc. There's such a big list. My worry is going to be we're going to miss someone out, and that won't be intentional. But I concur with what you're saying. Trish, did you want to come in?
Yes, I'd just like to say, as the chief executive who's been the lead for welfare across the whole of this since the beginning of the pandemic, I would concur with Councillor Forster's comments, because I've been on those welfare calls with many people from Hampshire County Council, but also from the NHS and also from the voluntary sector. I think there is a massive opportunity here to actually build on the brilliant relationships actually we've built out of this. And so I'm one of my greatest hopes in terms of that lessons learned piece is that when we come out of COVID the other end, actually the relationships between all of the parties and our ability to open up those conversations and get things done for our communities remains in place, because that's been one of the real benefits of this process.
Okay, I think we're agreeing with you, Steve, what it's worth. Right.
Thank you. Delighted.
I've got Councillor Dawn. Chris.
Thank you, Leader. It's just two little points on that. Certainly locally for me, the age concern group that sort of came together and was very much a hub for what was delivered in our local village area. They're now using the back of this to try and draw people into a more permanent arrangement to actually improve their age concern delivery, and it's proved quite a strong catalyst, and I hope others might be able to benefit from that. The second thing is, and I really don't expect anyone to name any names, but I hope members are aware of the COVID awards that are being run by government. We've certainly made several, I'm just going to say, recommendations to that award service locally, and we wait to see what happens and what comes out of it. But as an opportunity to thank particular individuals, it's something that clearly members and parishes can pick up and exercise locally.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I think we'd all agree with that. Right, do we have any more questions on the report we have in front of us? I'm looking, and I think we're good for now. Okay, so we've actually got 6 recommendations in 2.1. They are bullets. As the Chief Executive has already laid out, things are moving on, and this is almost out of date already. But the intent in there and the actions that will flow from it are important, and there's something that I hope we can get behind. So I'll formally move the adoption of these. And again, I will remind everyone the last one there is about using the council staff car park for the provision of testing moving forward, be it for COVID or influenza. And I look for a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Councillor Quarterman.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, is there anyone that feels we need to have any debate? No? Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. Apologies, again, we'll go through a named vote. Can you please say whether you are for, against or abstaining? Firstly, Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you.
So we're saying for to note the paper.
Yes.
We're not making a decision here, are we?
Well, I think there are decisions in there. They're just
okay.
It's a recommendation, so that's how I'm
yeah, absolutely 100% for that. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Cockrell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cannell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Neighbour votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quarterman.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Radley.
For.
Thank you very much. Right. So we now move to item 11 on the agenda, which is car boot sales / Sunday market, which is paper G. This is the report of the Chief Executive under the portfolio of Councillor Quarterman, portfolio holder of commercialisation. Richard, is there anything in the report you would like to bring to our attention before we ask questions?
Sure. So just briefly then, this was a nice little surprise waiting for me in my inbox when I got back from holiday. We have had a car boot sale running on a council car park in Fleet over the course of the summer. And we got to the point of were we going to continue with it or not? And the question was, should we be looking at this as a commercialisation opportunity? So what we've agreed is that we will consider a number of options about our policy for car boot sales and Sunday markets, because it's essentially, the question is how we're using council assets such as car parks, and whether we should be using them in such a way as to generate some income for the council. So a number of options have been put forward in this paper. What we're actually asking to do today, though, is not make a final decision on this. What we're asking for is A, permission for the car boot sale that's already up and running to carry on, because that does need now a cabinet authorisation. Secondly, that we should have a policy on car boot sales. And then thirdly, given a number of options that have been identified, the officers are asking Cabinet for a steer on preferences around those options. So that's the purpose of the paper this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So can I ask, are you suggesting that we choose an option for C?
What I'm suggesting is that if there is a strong preference for an option of out of the 4 options that are expressed under C, then now is your chance to articulate that so that it can be properly investigated and then come back with a formal recommendation from the officers.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Right, okay. Questions? Okay, I've got a hand up from Councillor Forster. Steve, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, reading the paper, it looks as though this will potentially permit a car boot market to operate from early November and not sooner. I'd like to understand why it's only now that this is coming to Cabinet and going through the initial process and tendering and decision, rather than it having been initiated some while back. Wonderful with 2020 hindsight, but when the initial car boot was proposed on very good reasons, it means that that provider couldn't bid for it easily, although I hope they will be invited to bid. I'm just wondering why there's been such a delay, and it only seems to have arisen and come as a paper after I basically queried it.
If I can, Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Hughes.
So if we had taken this route and this option to bring this paper to you, then there would have been no car boot sales during the summer period, because we would not have had the delegated authority to do that. So we would have had to wait until now, essentially, to bring this paper to you to consider the options. The monitoring officer, in conversation with the portfolio holder for car parks, took the route of using executive decision, which has limited capacity, to enable the car boot sale to be tested and piloted on a car park. So we could establish what the level of interest was and how effective it was. And indeed, in these times, as we've been talking earlier on, how COVID secure actually provisions were. Having faced the fact that has been quite a successful pilot, with the Cabinet undoubtedly came back to officers and said that appeared to work, so now we need to find a policy and find a mechanism by which we can bring it forward. If we had done this in the reverse order, there would not have been a car boot sale in the first place, and we would not have brought this decision forward any quicker, because frankly there hasn't been officer resources to bring this forward any quicker.
Okay, I think that's a clear answer. Yes, absolutely, Steve, far away.
Thank you. I appreciate what you're saying. My understanding is it could have potentially been done concurrently, therefore permitting the trial and a decision or a tendering process to have been run straight after the end of it, rather than waiting for another 4 or 5 weeks. But I appreciate that there was a lack of officer resource, and that underpins it. What I would ask, though, is since we're looking at this as a commercialisation strategy, are we looking at the same for the use of Fleet Road? Because it seems that is a commercial opportunity, and we seem to be taking divergent routes for car parks and for Fleet Roads on things that maybe could move between them for instance, the very crazy golf could have been in Gurkha Square, for instance, or in one of the car parks, maintaining fire access, etc. And there's lots of events that could take place in Gurkha Square, and I'm just wondering why we seem to have a very different policy for car parks and for the pedestrianised area. Could that be answered, please?
Yeah, I'm going to do that off the top of my head, so it might well be wrong, Steve. But what I would say to you is we've got a paper on pedestrianisation in a minute, and it's a temporary trial. What we're talking about here in this paper is our car parks, and we've got those. We have them now, and we will continue to have them. So this is to look at the benefit of the car boot sales that have happened and to decide whether or not we can use that awful, ugly phrase, sweat the assets of our car parks in terms of commercialisation. I think your point is well made. It's just not relevant to the paper we have in front of us. We need to look at through pedestrianisation. It's a paper later on in the agenda, and it has some way to go from being a temporary scheme to either being stopped, continued, or amended. And I'm not going to prejudice which way it goes. I think there'll be a time and a place to take that decision.
Can I just also make an observation on that?
Yeah.
Obviously the key difference between the Fleet High Road and the car parks is that we own the car parks. They are very much council-owned assets, and therefore it very much comes within the remit of commercialisation as to what return we get on use of those assets. The other point I'd like to make, just in case it wasn't very obvious to Councillor Forster, is A sub point 1 is very much and was kind of one of the things that we insisted on putting into this paper is to allow the existing operator to continue for the time being, because it's clearly not sensible to make something that's been successful over the short term, over the summer, stop while we then make a decision and then come back with a policy. So we have made provision in this paper to allow the existing operator to continue to operate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's really encouraging. And can I just ask if a conversation has been had with the existing operator on that?
I know that the existing operator has been contacted and informed of what we're doing on this. So yes, a conversation has taken place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Warlock, Jane.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just a question really relating somewhat to, I guess, number 10, COVID-19, bearing in mind that it is likely that some of the restrictions may change again, and they have changed probably since this paper was initially conceived. But I just wondered how that would be monitored, because in some of the riotous car boot sales I've been to, quite a lot of people congregate around an area and so on. And it just crossed my mind whether planning had been done to think about that, and what might happen in the event that the situation worsens.
Okay, thank you for that. It's a previous item, but I think it's a good question. So if anyone else can indulge me, I'm going to ask the Executive if she can help myself and Councillor Warlock.
It is very much, thank you, Councillor Warlock, it's very much a dynamic position that we're currently in. And you may have seen in an email that came out last night that Public Health are taking a view in relation to fun fairs. I am anticipating some guidance from Public Health over the next week or so in terms of their guidance on Remembrance Sunday events, on bonfire events, on a whole host of events. So your comment is very apropos to where we are right now with COVID-19. And so I suppose in a simple way, I can't answer your question right now because things are evolving, so my apologies, but we will obviously take the guidance of Public Health in anything that we do before we do it. So please be reassured that we're very live to that issue.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay. Right, I don't have any more hands up for questions. So we have a recommendation for us. Richard, are you happy to move the recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move the recommendation, and I ask for a seconder.
We haven't, thank you. I will formally second that. You want us to talk about our preferences in C. I'm mindful that in the questions no one talked about it, so I'm going to ask members to give an indication of their preference on the direction of travel with C in their contributions.
Is it worth me just briefly articulating what those options are so that it's clear to everybody?
That might well prove helpful, thank you.
So basically what we're saying is we've got a number of options here on car boot sales. If we go for option 1, that's to run this as a commercial opportunity ourselves, therefore to go and tender to operators and take the revenue from those car boot sales ourselves. The second option is to do it basically the same way, but to do it as a charitable concern. So in other words, to give the proceeds to charity. The third option is to actually run it ourselves, i.e. not to tender, but to actually run the car boot sales ourselves, retaining or sharing the profits, the proceeds as appropriate. And then finally, to just put in place a policy where the council will basically not do it as a commercial enterprise, but do it as a charitable enterprise and allow people with bona fide charitable purposes to run car boot sales on our assets. Each of those are models that have been used by other councils, and we still need to do a bit of further research on exactly what all the fine detail pros and cons of each of those are. But those are the basic options that we were considering, and we would like to get a feel and a steer from the Cabinet as to which they prefer. I just quickly check with the Joint Chief Exec that she's comfortable with that summary and doesn't have anything to add to that.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Quarterman. Spot on.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, I have a plethora of hands, I'm delighted to say. So in no particular order, we will have Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Radley, then Councillor Cockerell, and then Councillor Ambler and Councillor Cadell. So, Al, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Never has so much interest been generated for such a small car boot sale. You know, it's first of all, I'd say thank you for putting the paper forward so quickly, Councillor Quarterman. I know that you're on holiday and this arrived in your inbox. I would have liked to have been able to use my executive position to actually continue the car boot sale for for Victoria Road. Unfortunately, can't do that under the really succinct opinion of our chief executives, and it's in the paper. So I'm not going to go there. So I think the solution that's been put forward in enabling the current operator, if he wishes to continue for a month, while we look at the commercial opportunity, can't do that under the really succinct opinion of our chief executives, and it's in the paper. So I'm not going to go there. So I think the solution that's been put forward in enabling the current operator, if he wishes to continue for a month, while we look at the commercial opportunities, is very sound, and that's a good way forward. I would strongly advise on taking option 1 in your 4 options, because I don't think as a council we have the skills or the time to start running car boot sales. I think we have a lot of other things to do, and the commercial opportunity here is not huge. Car boot sales are not going to be a huge revenue generator. What they are good for is community engagement, for people to be able to recycle their own provisions, to actually engage with the wider community. So I think this is a community opportunity. I think we can actually recover our costs and also make maybe a small contribution to our commercial agenda, but you're going to talk hundreds or thousands of pounds in the year, it won't fill the gap caused by COVID in our leisure services. We're not talking millions here. So I think this is a service to the community to use an underutilized piece of asset, because on a Sunday morning in Victoria Road, you're talking about car parking charges that we would defer of less than £100. So it's not as if you're giving a facility that's going to generate lots of money. So I think this is something that we can do for the benefit, whether it's just the Fleet car park or a Hook car park or an Odium car park. I think that's also a very good extension to this paper to look at it Hart wide, not just Fleet. So
okay,
I would just propose that, and thank you for bringing the paper forward, Richard.
Okay, no problem.
so Alan, I want to put words in your mouth so we understand where you're coming from. You're basically saying that because the sums involved are small, this should be something which we facilitate rather than run ourselves. You're saying you're content with either Roman numeral 1 or 2. Is that correct?
I would be strongly in favour of Roman numeral 1. Uno.
Right. Okay, thank you. Right, I'm just making a quick note who else has their hand up. That's the last time I asked. Okay, thank you very much. So I've got James next. Councillor Radley, please.
So just to point out that the options, in my view, are not mutually exclusive. So if we were to go with option 1 for a nominated car park of Victoria Road, say, it wouldn't preclude us allowing charity car park events anywhere else in the district, or if there was an appetite for a regular event and someone was willing to operate it, to go with options 1 or 2 as well. So each car park is actually amenable to a different choice. Clearly, the focus of this conversation is Victoria Road, but I don't want us to exclude allowing charity events in Hook, for instance, or Hartley Whitney. So yeah, just that's the observation I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay, so your solution, James, is many options might be relevant in different car parks across different parts of the council.
Yes, and I suspect eventually we will need whoever the executive member to make, a sensible judgment as to which of those options applies in which case. And I think that will depend on multiple circumstances, which sat here today I can't anticipate. But okay. I do take note of what Councillor Oliver said. Noted.
Okay. Right. Councillor Cockrell next.
Sorry, Leader, I was expecting somebody else before me, so I was sort of slightly not really prepared. Yeah, Councillor Quarterman has asked us for opinions on options. I think for me, just sort of reading through it fairly briefly with the evidence we've got in front of us, I think for me, I'd be comfortable with pretty much anything other than 3. I agree entirely with Councillor Oliver's point about councils not necessarily being the best people to run these things, and I think anything. I think if we were to find ourselves running a car boot sale, I suspect it wouldn't actually be very profitable at all. We have some experience with markets, etc. It's not things that local governments necessarily do well. So I'm happy for officers to see what providers might be out there and willing to operate a car boot sale in Fleet or elsewhere. I also think Councillor Radley's point about maybe in different circumstances requiring slightly different solutions is a valid point, actually. But as long as we don't end up running them, I'm pretty much content. I think we'll come to a sensible decision, whichever way we look at it, as long as it's not us doing it. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ambler, next, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, totally agree with Councillors Cockrell and Oliver in that when it comes to who should be running it, it certainly shouldn't be us as a councillor. I think we've enough strain on our resources without trying to divert into something we really know nothing about. So that leads me down the line of option 1 being the favourite, but as Councillor Radley said, different circumstances may lead to different outcomes. because the final part of the sentence on option 3, I think maybe we could defer for another date when we know how much money's involved, which is retaining or sharing proceeds as appropriate. Bearing in mind this is probably likely to be a relatively small amount, I would have thought we may decide at some stage that some of the money will go to one of our associated charities. So I wouldn't rule that out, but that, I guess we could discuss that at a later date once we've assessed it. So I think option 1 is probably the starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So just to let everyone know, I've got councillors Cannell, Bailey and Forster in that order. So Sarah, you're next, please.
Yes, I haven't got anything to add. I think everything's already been said, actually. My favoured option is 1. Again, like other members, I would rule out 3 to run it ourselves. And I agree with Councillor Radley. I think we should also be looking at 2 and 4 where appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bailey, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why we're being asked to give a preference. I probably go along with what everybody's said so far, but I can't see this being a major piece of work. If we're going to do a little bit more work to work out, come back with what looks like the best option. You don't. I think there seems to be some sort of consensus around using up a lot of officer resource on a regular Sunday to run the thing is probably one that we can discount. But I think on the others, just, you know, I hope this isn't our biggest commercialisation opportunity this year. We're not going to make much money out of it. So it's primarily a community asset. If the money can go to a local charity, and supporters of that charity want to make it work, then even better. But let's just pull together a paper which are the pros and cons of each in a recommendation, rather than this. I know nothing about car boot sales, so for me to choose one of those 3 options that are still there that people are saying we could look at, I wouldn't know which one to go for.
Can I just say that the reason we're doing this now is because if we didn't have a cabinet decision now, then we wouldn't be able to authorise the continuation of the existing one.
Okay. Yeah. Well. So yeah.
So that's why.
I mean, I'm quite. You know, to be completely honest, I'm quite happy for officers and Richard to do the work, make the decision. It doesn't need to come back to cabinet in November to decide whether the money's going to a charity or a charity's running it, or we're going to make 200 quid a week out of it. We'll probably be in the middle of the second wave of coronavirus by then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forster, Steve.
Yeah, just very briefly, I was delighted to hear Councillor Radley proposing that it could be either. I think it's great if it goes to charity, or if charity wants to use it for car boots, as the Lions did. It would be wonderful if they can use it and use it without cost rather than on a commercialisation basis, whereas commercial organisers could use it and contribute to the council costs. I was stunned to hear Councillor Oliver saying that the total cost or lost revenue for Victoria Road was about £100. So one other consideration could be providing that as a free car park for Sundays to encourage business.
Okay, right. I'm going to try and summarise before I put this back to Councillor Quarterman, but it looks like we have almost unanimity that we want to actually provide these car boot sales ourselves like a hole in the head. We are quite relaxed about whether the money goes to good causes or is a small value aspect of our commercialisation strategy. I think the important thing is that we don't get officers to have to spend too much time in turning this into an action. I think that's my main concern as the leader of the council, is this is rather de minimis. It might be a nice thing to do and the right thing to do, but I hope we're not going to be spending too much officer time and resources in making it work. So I'm very happy for us to to tender this out, and I'm quite happy for the value gained from it to be decided at a later date, whether it's for the council, the council's charities, or for the chairman of council's charities, Uncle Tom Cobley and all. So I'm quite relaxed. Right. Having heard the debate, Richard, are you willing to amend C?
Well, let me just. Yeah, I guess we can. Advice from the chief exec. Do I need to actually amend it, or can we just take note of the recommendation that was made by cabinet and build that into our thinking? I don't think we need to spend very much more time debating this.
Chairman, it would be helpful for the purposes of the minutes and for us in terms of audit purposes later on, for it to be clear which of the options that cabinet were recommending, recognising that there is a plethora of approaches which could actually occur in due course, and not wishing to prevent those happening in time. If we actually want to bring forward a car boot sale with any longevity to it, my recommendation is we amend recommendation C to actually now delete 2, 3 and 4, so that the recommendation is now that in drafting a car boot sale market policy, the Joint Chief Executive is to carry out further investigations in seeking commercial value for car boot sales and tender the opportunity.
Okay. Right, I have James's hand up. James?
As mentioned when I spoke to this matter earlier, I would be very unhappy at the thought of us deleting option 4. I think you're absolutely right. There are certain car parks where a long-term regular car boot sale would be very welcome. And I actually recognise that you would need to do that on a commercial footing, whether it be 1 or 2. But there will be other car parks in the district or other dates in the week where a charity car boot sale would be very welcome. And if we were to exclude option 4, we're kind of sending the wrong message. We're actually suggesting that we don't want to encourage charities to use our car parks, and I don't think that's what we intend at all. So I would rather amend C to say something along the lines of, cabinet recognise that options 1, 2 and 3 are all viable, and request that officers or portfolio holder, whichever is most appropriate, use best judgment on a case-by-case basis. But I certainly don't want us to send a message that we're going to rule out charity car boot sales. I think that's definitely what we don't want to be doing.
No, I agree. I don't think we should amend it, frankly, because the way it's worded is consider one of the following options, maybe one or more of the following options. But we now know that option 3 is not one that anybody wants to consider.
Yeah, I guess my only concern from the chair is that spending a month having got down from 4 options to 3, how many more months is it going to take us to get down from 3 options to 1? Though I understand from Councillor Radley that actually what he wants is all options, because he wants the flexibility to have a different scheme in each car park on a different day. I think we are in danger of going down the rabbit hole with this. Surely we just need to actually see if it's worth tendering and see what interest there is, and we can decide about whether it's for charities or a de minimis amount for our commercialisation at a later date.
Fine.
I've got a lot of perplexed faces. I'm obviously speaking a different language. Okay, in no particular order, James, Richard and Alan, please. James?
I think it's quite clear that as a cabinet, we would like the council to pursue finding an operator to engage a regular car boot sale at Victoria Road. I think that's something we are comfortable with. We also want to have in there, and I don't know how we do it, but we need the message in there that this council welcomes approaches for charity car boot sales on other car parks around the district, or even on Victoria Road car park on a date that doesn't clash with the regular commercial one. And I suggest that we ignore in terms of the one that we do on a regular basis, whether we choose to give the money to charities directly or indirectly from the revenues generated is not a decision that we need to take now. It's revenue that comes into the council. It's revenue that we have in our coffers. And if a charitable need arises, which we're going to fund, it's effectively getting funded out of our revenue stream. So to identify now what you're using the revenue for is, I think, academic. What we're committing to is a regular car boot sale in Victoria Road if an operator is prepared to take it on, and the option to support requests for charitable car boot sales across our estate. If we can word C in that way, I'd be happy, but I'm very nervous about us just focusing on one and not making it clear that we welcome charitable car boot sales as well.
Okay, thank you, James. I'm going to call Alan, then Sarah, and then get Richard to sum up. Alan?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I can help here because in terms of the charitable activities, I already have discretionary powers to, as it were, to look after one-off events. So over the year, I give authority to run in a car park, you know, fleet cycling, food fair, hook cracker, and whatever. So I think we need to devolve the long-term commercial exploitation of our assets and one-off, shall we say, charitable activities that we can already cater for. And I have a budget for that, and it's in our budget in terms of the car park revenue that I defer for those activities that support community events. So I think we're getting ourselves tangled up into two things. One is the one-off charitable community events, and then the long-term provision of a market, a bit like Fleet Town Market, or this. So I would say I would urge members not to get hung up on wordsmithing how we handle one-off charitable boot sales across the district.
Okay, thank you, Alan. That's potentially very helpful.
And if I can just come in on that, Chairman, thank you very much for that, Councillor Oliver, because number 4 in C, to be clear, is where we would establish a policy where the council would only consider car boot sales where run for charitable purposes. So it's very much a difference between where Councillor Oliver is saying actually he already has the power vested under delegated powers to enable one-offs or occasionals.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Sarah?
Actually, I don't need to speak now. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. Richard, can you sum up for us, please?
Can I suggest that we just approve the paper as has been presented? The real reason, the principal reason that we're discussing this paper tonight is so that we can carry on with the existing car boot sale, and then we will take note of all that's been said today and build it into whatever recommendation is made, which may well just be an executive decision, but we will take account of all of those views that have been expressed. So may I urge Cabinet to accept the paper as it is?
Okay, I'm not seeing anyone agree with that.
I think that's a good idea. Let's go with that.
Right. Okay. So you're formally moving that recommendation. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Cannell, thank you very much. Any debate? No. Okay. Putting it to the vote. Please say you're for, against, or abstaining. Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cockerell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cannell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Neighbour votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Korsman.
For.
And Councillor Radley.
For.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay, we have 3 more items. We have a slight procedural problem, which is the chairman needs the lavatory. And I'm not quite sure, can James chair the meeting from over there?
He can, but we can, in fairness, Chairman, it might be well worthwhile, seeing as time has come upon us, to give ourselves a quick comfort break for everybody's purposes.
I would welcome a 5-minute comfort break as well.
Okay, right. So we'll keep it as tight as we can, but up to 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Okay, right, it is 9:35 on Thursday, the 1st of October. We are resuming Hart District Council's Cabinet meeting. Thank you for your patience. Item 12 on the agenda are the minutes from the Civic Regeneration Working Group, which is paper H. These minutes are for noting. Councillor Quarterman, you chair the Civic Regeneration Working Group. Is there anything you'd like to bring to our attention before I ask for questions?
Not really, actually. They're pretty self-explanatory, and the next meeting there'll be a lot more substance to it. This was quite an introductory sort of meeting. So,
okay.
In the interest of brevity, I'm happy to leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Do any other members present have any questions they'd like to ask? Councillor Oliver, Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to a comment on the notes, but I just wanted to make Councillor Quarterman aware. One of the issues around, I'm not saying pedestrianisation because we're going to talk about that later, about civic regeneration is I think there's an opportunity to get more engaged with the Hart shopping centre, because one of the opportunities that came through my involvement with Fleet Bid was about the potential to relocate district council offices and the library into the shopping centre. It was actually a proposal or a proposition put forward by the shopping centre managers. So all I wanted to do is, because I'm not part of the group, just make you aware of that, because I know your next meeting is in the next 1 or 2 days.
Yes, that's correct. We meet next Tuesday. So as I answered in a question to the full council last week, primarily the project is looking at the assets that we own on the Civic Quarter campus site, but we haven't ruled out other commercial opportunities that might exist. And part of the brief to the surveyors who are working with us is to consider those options. And I know one of the things that we have discussed and we have talked about is whether there is any interest in other sites in Fleet Town Centre, and obviously the Hart Shopping Centre is one of them. So it is within the purview of the project. It is being considered. I have not in a position at this stage of the game to comment on whether that is at all a viable thing or at all credible. But yes, we have taken note of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cannell, Sarah.
Yeah, just a quick question. 6H, to look at Woodley as a model. Are you able to just say quickly just what it is about Woodley? What have they done?
Yeah, so I'll see if I can remember this. This was something that Mark Jaggar, the head of place, mentioned. But in Woodley, there is an arrangement whereby the library and a supermarket have come into a kind of arrangement around shared facilities and shared parking. And he happened to be aware of that particular example and mentioned it at the meeting. So it's one of the things that was just being put forward as a possible example to consider.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Mark, you indicated you wish to speak. You've now put your hand down. I'm giving you the opportunity if you would like to come in.
Only if I could have been any more assistance, but Councillor Quarterman covered it all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so we've no more questions. Those have been noting, so thank you all, and I hope we have a good meeting next week. We then move on to item 13, which is to reflect on the council motion passed last week at full council, pedestrianisation of Fleet Road. This is paper, well, I think it's got a paper, hasn't it? It's a briefing note. Graham, the decision that's going to be taken is yours in consultation with your fellow cabinet member. Would you like to just explain why we have the paper in front of us and what you need from us tonight?
Yes, Leader, I'll try and keep this this brief. You will be, I think, all of us relieved to hear this is not about rerunning last Thursday's debate. This is simply about providing a mechanism whereby the motion that full council passed last Thursday can actually be carried out. So the motion has asked us to do a number of things around collating more evidence, in particular relation to the effect on the retail on Fleet Road, and then obviously to make a decision no later than the end of this month. We have engaged a consultant who was on the last Fleet working group call on Tuesday to carry out that work. I believe I can probably, it is a consultant who has worked with Bill Grimsey on his reports. So he is very familiar with the issues that we are currently dealing with. Really, what I need from Cabinet this evening really is under 2, A, B, and 3, A, B, and C rather, really to agree those items which is actually already happening, and specifically C, that I have the authority to decide by 31st of October in consultation with Councillor Oliver whether or not the scheme can continue based on the evidence. We will be having at least probably 2, if not 3 further Fleet Working Group meetings, I would imagine, and we'll probably have one at the in the last week of October. So although from a technical point of view, it will be in consultation with Councillor Oliver, I will obviously be consulting with the fleet members in that working group as well, as they are obviously very familiar with the issues. So I really just need Cabinet to agree the process set out in the paper, and then we can carry out Council's wishes as they have asked us to. I don't mind taking any questions, but hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. Thank you.
Okay, so we will take questions and then we'll have the note agreed, and we'll move it and then voted on. So I've got questions from Councillor Dawn and Councillor Bailey. At the moment, that's it. So Chris, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got about 4 questions. Do you want them individually or do you want them all run together?
Well, you know the level of detail the questions are in. If you think it's better to ask them one at a time.
I think so, Chairman.
Okay, right.
Right. So the first one, these relate basically to the consultant. I'm just struggling a little bit from the paper to understand the role of the consultant. Is he there to purely advise on the impact of business, or the balance between business and residents, i.e. the effectiveness of the scheme as a whole?
Graham, are you able to give Councillor Dawn an answer? I can read you 4 points. It says both, but
yeah, I can. So the motion that full council has passed is for us to take a decision based on the effect on the retail. However, because a number of members within the Fleet Working Group are concerned, quite rightly, about the potential effect on residents, whether that be from traffic or whatever, then the consultant has been made aware that is an area of concern. He will be primarily focusing on getting information from the retailers, because that is the bit that we have asked him to do in terms of an independent capacity, but we are also seeking further information from the residents. And of course, we have got quite a lot of resident feedback anyway from the scheme as it's been running.
Okay. Moving on to 4.2, the programme summary, I think at the top of page 3, it says there'll be a carefully targeted social media campaign. Could you clarify the purpose of the campaign? Is it to gather information or to propose a particular line?
Yes, it is really to try and engage the retailers primarily, but also wider, to get their views. The consultant does do a lot of online forums and social media contact in other consultations that he's done recently, and obviously bearing in mind the time that he's got available to do this, clearly he's going to try and utilize as much digitalization as possible.
Okay, and moving down into I think it's bottom 4.3, where it talks about the negative impact on business or residents, and clearly the two groups are drawn there, and there has to be, as you say, this balance between the two. Have you made any further progress in terms of how you might measure impact on the two groups? Because I mean, this was a point that was discussed a little bit at full council, and I recall Councillor Davis said she was going to go away and try and create a slightly more refined model, and I've seen some discussion that may have occurred today about that.
The short answer, Councillor Dawn, is no. We haven't come up with anything specific in that respect, partly because we've had a week to think about it. I know the officers are working on this to see what we can do. One of the things I would just say, at the risk of opening a already partially open can of worms, is a lot of the data that we're going to be collecting is going to be by nature qualitative rather than quantitative. It is going to be people's opinions. Therefore, some of the data that we are going to get back, and indeed that some of the data we have got now in terms of the impact, is going to be based upon people's opinions. And therefore, we are going to have to do a certain amount of judging the validity of people's opinions.
Yeah, that's always going to be a challenge. And
that's the point I was trying to illustrate, Councillor Dawn.
Yeah, indeed, Councillor Cockrell, and that's why I was keen to push to try and expand the definition of that impact in some way that gives us a slightly more subjective handle on what is quite a more objective handle on what's quite a subjective topic.
The only way that I can see of actually doing that, and I've raised it in the meetings, but it's just not going to be feasible, is to get turnover data and accounts data from the retailers, and clearly we will not be getting that. That's going to be the only verifiable way of telling you what's happening. But in 2.5 weeks, that's not going to happen, Councillor Dawn.
I very much appreciate that, and I'm not suggesting that you should try and go, wrestle their profitability figures out of them. But this is what I'm trying to suggest, is that when you look at the impact on business, there will be an element of say, perhaps turnover, and you might measure something like footfall. And clearly footfall does not equal turnover. These are two different measurements, and we need to be able to look at them objectively at the end. My last question then is at 4.4, it says the timetable set out in the motion is challenging, and that you can't hold a cabinet or any other meeting to make this decision. I'm just sort of surprised by that, because I would have thought we should be able to have some sort of meeting. I mean, goodness, if we put our minds to it, we could even have a full council meeting, couldn't we, to make such a difficult and monumentous decision?
There are three options. Potentially there are three options, Councillor Dawn. We could have an emergency cabinet meeting in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. We could have a meeting, or we could meet raise it again in November, on the first Thursday of November, except of course that wouldn't fit with the timescale that Council has very kindly given me. Or we can actually do what we have been asked to do and was actually requested in the first council motion, which is take a delegated decision based upon all of the evidence available and make a decision quickly that we can then carry on. You know, if Councillor Dawn, if you wish to come back in 3 weeks' time and have a meeting about this again and discuss the same thing that we've discussed, you know, 3 times in the last 3 months, then you'll be very welcome to have that meeting. You know, but the quickest way to do it, the easiest way to do it, is let the consultant do the work, let the officers collate the data that we're getting from Hampshire and other sources, bring it to myself, Councillor Oliver, and the Fleet working group, which is made up, apart from myself, of Fleet members who are living this day to day, and they can advise me as to what they think the best solution is. I suspect that would be as illuminating as any other discussion that we might have about this, Councillor Dawn.
Can I raise a point of order?
What keeps happening is we get more information each time, but fine, thank you for your responses.
Okay, right.
I have a point of order, but I assume the Chief Executive or the leader might be making the same point that I'm about to make.
No, I wasn't. I was merely going to say I've had quite a few people that want to speak, several of whom have put their hands down and have subsequently put their hands back up. So I'm actually got a bit of a weird list of people to call at the moment. James, what's your point of order?
So, Council made a decision last time, which was they request the relevant portfolio holder or holders to make a decision based on the data that has been raised. It's worded that way because we do not have the authority to change the statutory structure of a cabinet-based council, and we as cabinet don't have the power to overrule the motion from full council. The motion is clear that we are requesting the relevant cabinet members to make a decision. It is not in our gift to offer more meetings to discuss it. The first 2 options that Councillor Cockrell raised are completely null and void. There's only one option, and that is the relevant cabinet member makes a decision based on the evidence presented to them by a particular date. End of.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Right. Okay, I believe I have the following people, but please intimate if you don't need to be called. I've got Councillor Bailey, I've then got Councillor Forster, I've then got Councillor Cannell, and I've got Mark Jaggard. Are you? No, I think Mark's saying he doesn't need to speak.
Dave, I don't need, Councillor, but I don't need to speak now. James has just covered the
Okay, that's
raise.
right. So we just have Councillor Bailey and Councillor Forster. So Stuart.
You'll be pleased to know, Mr. Chairman, I've decided that I won't ask the question I was going to ask because I don't think it would help.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forster, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few questions. I'll string them together if someone wants to make a note of them, if that's okay, or I can ask them individually. The first thing was a sort of comment that leads into a question. The comment is this is totally focused on business input, putting that effectively, it does mention balancing that against the impact on businesses and businesses as well as residents. But I think surveying and gathering data from residents is an absolutely essential element to be able to provide that correct balance. So will the council, as part of its activity over the next 3 weeks, because I understand the decision has to be made in 3 weeks' time, to take it out within 4, ensure that residents, in particular on Albert, Clarence, Connaught, Eltham Road, which are more impacted, as well as elements of Kings Road and Reading Road, are actually properly canvassed for their views, and they and others are encouraged to, whether it's through a survey or through more than the Fleet Road survey, Fleet Road email address, to provide proper feedback, so that can be balanced against any business feedback. So that's my first question. My second question relates to the face-to-face dialogue. Visit Fleet and target all businesses is specified. Well, the Fleet businesses that are part of Fleet Bid is, I understand, over 350, nearly 400 businesses. That's a huge number to target. I wonder if the consultant is aware that that covers waterside business park, etc., or whether this is going to be focused only on those businesses in the pedestrianised area or nearby, or those who've objected to it, such as the businesses in Birch Parade, etc. Clipboard surveys implies it's going to be a walk up and down the high street. Again, that doesn't get the views of those businesses that aren't in the high street, that are adjacent to it, but affected, or residents. And a very biased element in this face-to-face dialogue is measure benefits and gather standout case studies. Well, that implies they're only looking at things that are positive. I think it's vital when gathering evidence from businesses to measure the disadvantages and the standout case studies of disruption, poor impact, such as those provided by really important businesses like Bakers and Toy Arena, like Captured Moment, because that is really, really relevant, not just measuring the businesses. Follow-up phone calls and letters is mentioned further up. Well, to who? And focus groups, is that businesses or residents? It's really unclear. And I think it is vital that it is done impartially to a wide cross-section, and that doesn't mean what's happening at the moment. I also note in 4.4, engagement may not be as comprehensive as provided by the consultant. Well, when he was pitching to us, my understanding was what he said was the minimum necessary, and he'd already taken a number of shortcuts. So how are we going to do that and ensure it really is impartial, especially when the decision is being made by a very small subsection of the cabinet, even proposed, not cabinet as the motion actually presented. It didn't say cabinet members, it said cabinet, which implies the entire cabinet. So I wonder if you can cover those. I probably have a couple more that I haven't got round to, but I am really concerned that we're not doing what Council intended, which is kicking the can down the road, delaying it to gather more objective evidence. This is, you've now said yourself, about subjective evidence, and there are still no KPIs published that says whether something is acceptable or not.
Right.
And that is something
Councillor,
that I have repeatedly asked for.
Right.
Graham, do you want to answer the specifics, or do you want to just generalise an answer to Councillor Forster's, I'll call them questions, because there were more a case of saying, I disagree, and here's some questions.
Yeah, I'll do a reasonably, I'll try and answer each of the points, but I'll try and do it in a generic form because there is some detail in there. So the Councillor Dawn already raised the issue about, are we looking at residents and businesses, or just businesses and residents? The answer is we're trying to get an objective view from both, although again, the motion talks about the impact on the retailers primarily. And that's why we have engaged a consultant who's worked around retail. But as Councillor Forster was in the previous meeting at the Fleet Working Group, he will know that these points were raised with the consultant, who was very keen to take that on board. Clearly, if the information and the data that we get back suggests that irrespective of the effect on the retail side of things, the residential impact is so great that it should not continue, then clearly that will be you would look at it in that way. We'll have to wait and see what happens when we get that information collated. In terms of the face-to-face, again, yes, the consultant is aware of the tight timescales and is aware of the nature of the retail environment in Fleet, obviously. He will have to do the best he can. I would say that I don't think it's particularly fair for members of the council who have passed a motion with a deadline of the 31st of October requesting us to go and get detailed information that can be independently verified, to then carp that we're not giving a consultant enough time to do the work. That's an observation back to council. All I can really do at this stage, Leader, is just reiterate that we are doing what we have been asked to do by. I and the officers are doing what we've been asked to do by council on the motion, and we are trying to do it to the best of our ability. Clearly, there are members of the council, and there will be members of the retail community, there will be members of the residential community who fundamentally disagree with the scheme, which is their choice and their right. There are others who think it's a very good idea and wish it to continue. There are others in the middle who are still making up their minds. This is the process that we're going through, and in 3 weeks' time, we will have a meeting with the Fleet members, with the consultant, with the member, with the officers. The data will be there, and we will decide collectively. Although, as I say, the final decision will be on a piece of paper with my name on it. Whether or not we think the impacts on the retail and residential communities outweigh the benefit, the negative impacts outweigh the positive benefits, or vice versa. And on that basis, we will take the decision. I just can't say any more than that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Right. Okay. We have a recommendation in front of us. Are you prepared to move that recommendation, Councillor Cockerell?
I am, yes. I shall move it and look for a seconder.
I will second it from the chair. Sorry, Councillor Canal, I apologise. I want to speak to it. We have had 2 meetings in full council in the last few months. This is a very contentious issue, and opinion is divided. It's divided everywhere you look, and people are changing their mind frequently. There are some individuals who started off being in favour and are now against. There are others who were against it in principle, but now see some of the benefits. Doesn't make anyone right. It's going to be very subjective, and I suspect whatever else happens, there will be plenty of people who will not be happy. We have a motion from council. This paper allows Cabinet to put that motion into practice, and I make no apologies for saying that the decision will ultimately rest with Councillor Cockerell, because Councillor Cockerell is going to have the benefit of the consultant and the data that has been accrued. He will have the benefit of the 9 Fleet members who will help him make this decision, and he will be aided by a fellow Cabinet member. I am a bit concerned that some of the questions seem to be a case of, I'm not happy with what this approach might lead to as a result, as if it's a foregone conclusion. It isn't, it shouldn't be, and there will be an audit trail. At the end of the day, we are going to have to be content with that. Once a decision is made, this council will live with the consequences of that decision. Some people will be less than happy, and they will make their opinions known. Others might be relieved and content. But at the end of the day, we are here to do this work. This work came out of a COVID exercise. That was the original point. And many people seem to be using it in a very overtly political way. And I'm not picking on one side or another in the opinions. I'm just saying this should be about evidence, and it should be about a measured decision. Not everyone will be happy with that decision because our community is divided. But we owe it to the community to provide as much evidence as we can in the time we've given ourselves, and then to come up with a solution. We'll leave it at that. Is there anybody else who would like to debate the recommendation we have in front of us? I've got Councillor Bailey.
I will speak now, and
yeah,
if I may, and it's not a question. I think the motion that Council passed last week wasn't perfect, but it was the best motion in view of the position that the Council finds itself in with a divided community. I see Councillor Forster shaking his head, but he knows what it's like to change his mind on issues like this because he's done it himself. The important thing, abstain one. Sorry, a point of order. No. I'm not going to get into. He said you abstain 1 month, and that's quite right. And other councillors from different groups did exactly the same. I think we have a process which will give us some objective information. If there is a view that people feel there's a process here where we're asking an independent consultant to do something that is weighted for one part of the argument or another. There were members of Cabinet who voted in the original motion 2 months ago, voted one way and voted another way. This is an objective exercise. It will give us some evidence. It should mean that in 3 weeks' time, when that evidence is collated, as Councillor Neighbour has said, there will be people who vehemently agree on one side or the other that they're disappointed or they're jubilated from the decision. But at least there will be some evidence that has been collated independently, which will be less questionable. And by saying that, I'm not putting aspersions on any of the evidence that was presented last week, but it wasn't done independently. It was done from different sources. So I congratulate the officers and Councillor Cockrell and others who have pulled this together in the last 6 to 7 days. I look with interest for somebody who will be led by the evidence. And if we'd had more time, we could have done a bigger exercise, but we've got 3 weeks. And I look forward to seeing what the evidence says.
Right, thank you, Stuart. I've got Councillor Oliver next, please. Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would endorse what Councillor Bailey said there. And I will fully support Councillor Cockrell and look at the evidence objectively. I'm glad to say I've been able to get hold from Fleet Town Council more traffic data that is supposedly unavailable from Hampshire for Albert Street 2012 and 2016 traffic counts to actually help us in objectively looking at what is happening in the community and take the decision from that data. Okay, so I look forward to those discussions, Councillor Cockrell, and I think this is an excellent paper.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak to the motion we have in front of us? No? Okay, so that's going to be put to the vote. If you could say whether you are for, against or abstaining. First name is Councillor Ambler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cockerell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cannell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Neighbour votes for. Councillor Oliver.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Quarterman.
For.
And Councillor Radley.
For.
Thank you. Right, that is unanimous. That takes that item. We then move on to item 14, which is the Cabinet Work Programme, which is paper I. Can I ask the Chief Executive, are there any items on the Cabinet work programme which we are aware have slipped?
Chairman, not to the best of my knowledge. We've obviously included the fact we may wish to bring back a further car boot sale report further to this evening's considerations.
Yeah.
With of that, no, I'm not aware of any changes. Naturally, portfolio holders may have had more recent conversations with their heads of service and may have greater detail on that.
Okay. Right, so page 1 is stuff that we've been dealing with tonight. So we'll go to page 2. I note with trepidation that the second item on page 2 is Fleet Road pedestrianisation, an update on the progress of the High Street scheme, scheduled for November. I take it after the full council motion that item will not be on that computer.
Yes, Chairman. Obviously, it's the nature of when items reports are published and when they go in the public domain, and naturally, therefore, this was prepared in advance of when the full council was heard.
Yeah. Okay.
But Chairman, it would still be. Sorry, Councillor Radley had his hand up.
Okay, James.
Well, we're going to go ahead. I was just, please, Councillor Bailey, carry on and follow.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say it would still be very relevant to have an update as to. I mean, the decision will have been made, and it's then either the progress of moving things back to where they were and how we still ensure COVID space where we can, or the decision will be made that it remains, but there may still be other things to discuss in terms of further work that needs to do to improve the scheme. So it'll still be a topical issue, whichever way, whether there's traffic flowing down Fleet High Street or not, I guess.
But if a decision is made at the end of October, there is no way there will be a paper ready the first Thursday in November.
And not a paper update? No. Okay. Yeah, and we don't have verbal updates. Okay.
This is our work programme.
Yeah, okay.
Be a paper on the subject.
Yeah.
Councillor Radley.
Just to point out that just because it's a controversial paper doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in my name. I think it might be Councillor Cockrell this time around.
Oh dear.
Most of it, Councillor Cockrell's name, actually.
How about me? I'll take it.
Pass the part.
My apologies.
Yeah, I did notice that. I think that should be GC, not JR. But
yeah, my apologies, Councillor Radley. What you can't see is our committee services team are sitting here slightly embarrassed. They will make sure that's amended.
All I can say is checks in the post, girls. Thank you very much. Right, I apologise. That was inappropriate. Is there anything else on page 2's work programme that anyone can update us on? No. Okay, and then page 3. Okay, right.
Chairman, I was going to say you'd like to get another.
I have one question.
Sorry, who's Councillor Forster?
Yeah, one question on the work programme. One thing that isn't on the work programme that I just wanted to query. Is the project that Cabinet has instigated on the civic quarter regeneration, which I know is underway with working groups. I'm just surprised that that doesn't appear on the work programme at all. Should it?
So obviously the civic regeneration working group notes always come to Cabinet whenever there is a meeting, but until we get to a stage where a decision needs to be made, it wouldn't appear on this report because the list of reports going forward, that report doesn't exist. So there will be regular updates on the civic regeneration working group for noting, and we can ask Councillor Quarterman questions, but there will only be a paper when there is this decision for Cabinet to make.
Can I just make an observation on that? I think at our next meeting, which is obviously next Tuesday, we are looking at the preliminary findings that our consultants will have come up with, and I think that is probably an appropriate moment for us to schedule a more formal update, so we can then put an item onto the programme for a paper from that group, which I think at the moment will either be January or February, but I will confirm after we've had the meeting next week.
Okay. Is that helpful, Councillor Forster? Does that give you some encouragement? Yeah.
And Chairman, just to advise, there may be a couple of asset-based reports that need to come forward to you in due course. Details to follow afterwards. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to go into any greater detail, but the delegation for the provision of leases and long-term leases is held by Cabinet, and they are subject to current and ongoing live conversations with a variety of organisations.
Okay. So as soon as we're aware that the paper is due, we'll put it.
It will be onto the work programme and it will be published.
Okay, good. Right. Can I thank you all for your participation? It is 10:15 and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.